an excellent person to lead as executive director of the association and to work with the elected officers as well as the executive committee, and to be very member focused. So one of the things we've been doing as an executive committee is crafting a document that helps us understand the role of the executive director and what the relationship between the executive director, the executive committee, the legislative assembly, the membership, and the officers should be. And that document, which we considered at the last executive committee meeting just about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., helped us talk through a lot of the issues that relate to the governance of the association. As officers, and as executive committee members, we really feel this is an opportune moment to consider how it is we interact, how to best provide the most excellent experience for members of the association, and how to govern well. And part of that is how to think about the executive director position. So just, I don't want to give you too much detail about that. Other people have things they want to say, but I'll just suffice it to say that we really see the executive director as someone who is member focused, who works well with a variety of groups and sees this as a collaborative effort to strengthen the association. And we go as search committee members for the executive director. We're going into this working on that. Okay, let me briefly also say that I've been working on a variety of events and activities relating to anti-Asian violence. And so we held a collaborative AEJMC, NCA, jointly sponsored event in which, via Zoom, in which we talked about journalism and news writing about anti-Asian violence throughout the country, which continues unabated. First Vice President Roseanne Manzik has agreed to host a first vice presidential panel on anti-Asian violence. And I worked closely with Shaunak Sastry, who's chair of the Asian Pacific American Caucus of NCA, to develop a panel that would specifically focus on that. As well, at the convention, you can look forward to a workshop on anti-Asian violence, specifically training people on bias bystander intervention. And so I worked closely with Lisa Hanasono, who so kindly is going to work with Blaise Campbell-Jacobs to offer a workshop training people on anti-bias intervention. Bystander intervention workshop. We've been doing a lot more than that, but I will stop now and turn it over to my colleagues to allow them an opportunity to talk about other things NCA is doing.
Thanks, Kent. Thanks for your leadership on the anti-Asian violence initiatives and efforts. So as second vice president, what I've been sort of working on is, first of all, you may or may not know, I don't know that I knew necessarily when all this work really sort of picked up in earnest, but 2022 convention is in New Orleans, and a lot of work actually has had to happen for preparation for that convention over the summer, and certainly in the next couple of months, because the call for papers essentially gets released before or at the convention. So there's lots of work that's happening in preparing for that. I say that for a few reasons. Maybe primarily because a lot of the sort of decisions that need to be made in some ways, there's some that we have time for, but other ways are being made now, and others will be made in the coming months. Which means that some of the things that our future conventions would look like, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, the timeline doesn't quite make it so that this, even the New Orleans one is able to fully kind of take that into account. But I have a local planning committee, a New Orleans planning committee that has been essential. There are folks in the discipline, and in one case on the periphery of the discipline, who are either situated in New Orleans or living in New Orleans, work in New Orleans, or from New Orleans. And that reflects my commitments for the convention, which is really going to be the theme is place, which is going to be acronym for people, liberation, advocacy, community, and environment. And it's going to be really around the history and the experience and the people of New Orleans. And so I'm really looking forward to that. But just to give you a sense, for a lot of that work is already happening and will be happening in the coming weeks. On that same note, Roseanne and I are sort of organizing a future conventions task force. So we talked about this before. There was some delay in putting it together, frankly, because of exhaustion. The folks we were, looking to in late spring were simply just exhausted to take on additional service. But we're thrilled that Julianne Scott Pollock is actually has agreed to chair the task force. So we're really thrilled about that. And we're in the process of recruiting other folks, asking for other folks, and there'll be an open call. There's going to be three at-large positions for that task force that we're going to be putting out a call in the next few days. We hope to have the roster completed by September 15th or shortly thereafter, and start working on the sort of mission for the task force is to gather all kinds of options for what hybridity looks like in the future of NCA conventions, including opportunities, best practices from what we learned, cost, logistical possibilities, et cetera, to ultimately land on a develop a report that ultimately lands on a proposed preference that then gets sent to the executive committee and there's deliberation and things. So this is a months-long process. They have a year to create the report, and then it gets discussed. So clear what I'll be consulting with them as I think through New Orleans, as we think through New Orleans. But this is about conventions well down the line. So there's that. The other task force that I'm working on very closely with Kristen Yednock in the national office is to look more closely at the way that division planners, that the experience of division planners. So we sent out a survey to division planners for the last 4 years, gathering feedback about their experience, how it can be better, how it can be more efficient, how, et cetera. And separately but relatedly, to think about the slot allocation process with the goal of, again, developing proposals to how we can do that more systematically and more consistently across the years, and have that be discussed at DC. So more broadly speaking, my commitments have really been around transparency and improved communication. And so those are things that I think the NCA office has been doing well and has been doing even better, and we look forward to additional work on that front. So again, very much welcome feedback on any of those issues, either to my email or I'm active on Facebook account, and keep an eye on the Communication Scholarship Transformation page. But in any way, please reach to any of us around these issues. And so I know, again, like the majority, I think we definitely have questions about the convention, so I will pass it on to Roseanne.
Okay, thank you. It's great to see everybody here. And again, I add my thanks to all of you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And so I want to do the same thing. Oh, you may see an appearance of from my cat here just in a moment. I'm going to take a little bit of time here to talk about two things, obviously the convention, but first, some of you may know, but may not know, that one of the initiatives that I did this year was to put together a task force that would write an inclusion, diversity, equity, and access strategic plan for our association. That task force was co-chaired by Ashley Mack from LSU and Rachel Griffin from University of Utah. And amazingly, they met all summer. They accelerated actually the timeline that I had given them. And they have delivered a very high quality draft that we are now reviewing. And it will go through some revision process. We'll take it through the executive committee, but we're very optimistic that that is something that very well could be adopted before the end of the year by the association. So, kudos to that whole team. I know there's a few folks here on the call that served on that task force, and thanks to them. It was an amazing effort. And going along with the theme of the convention, I think it's truly something that will have a transformative effect on what our association is and how we conduct many of the things that happen that make NCA work. And so I'm just so thrilled by the work of that group and so grateful to them. And you'll be hearing much more about that as that plan moves forward. Connected to that, you'll also probably, this is looking into next year, but I guess I'm becoming the strategic planning maven of NCA, that we're going to be moving into a process of updating and doing a new strategic plan overall for the association. And of course, that inclusion, diversity, equity, and access plan is essential to that larger vision. So welcome any questions you have about that, but that's been one of the really great efforts that's been underway and that is coming to fruition. And of course, the second thing that has been occupying my time and certainly that I know you all have a lot of questions about is the status of our 2021 convention in Seattle with the theme of renewal and transformation. And of course, we all know that the situation is ongoing, changing. We want to assure you that we are monitoring the local, the state, the facility, the federal guidelines. We're really concerned, as many, and all of you are for sure, about health and safety and well-being and how to conduct that convention in the best way possible. If you're not aware, there is a new website that was posted, or a page on, I should say, our NCA website that was posted last week that's in the convention area of the website. That gives you the updates and kind of explanations and information about the convention and COVID-19. And so if you haven't seen that webpage, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. It offers lots of explanations about why we're going face-to-face, about the current situation in terms of what it would have cost to do hybrid models, what our contracts are like when we enter into one of these large conventions, what the current situation is in Seattle. And we highly recommend that you continue to check that site because that's going to be our central way of getting you information about the convention as things change. But we're still optimistic. We're still, I know many folks are excited as well about the face-to-face possibilities. Many of us went back to face-to-face classes. I did yesterday. Many of us have not. And so we're all in, very different kinds of situations in our own communities and in our own place, as well as we look forward to this convention. But of course, we continue to monitor it. So for example, we've just learned that Seattle has instituted an indoor mask mandate. So that will definitely have implications for our convention. And of course, that will be something that we will follow. So, I'm happy to answer questions that you have about the convention. One of the decisions that the executive committee made back in June, when we were kind of monitoring the situation and hearing lots of the concerns about people and, your situations about concerns about health, about travel funds, about what is this really going to feel like and look like? And so one of the decisions that we made was to invest in live streaming 9 of the sessions at the convention. And that's different than what we've done before in terms of posting recordings afterward. And so that's an attempt, at least, and an invitation to many of you who might not be able to travel, or to your colleagues, to spread the word that those include the opening session about Native peoples in the Seattle area. It includes the presidential address from David and the awards ceremony, so you can be there live to congratulate your colleagues. It includes many of the vice presidential special sessions that I and my team have put together. And so we very much invite you to participate in those, to take advantage of those, to let your colleagues know about those and your students. And those will all be streamed live at the times during the convention schedule. So, you know, as we look at the prospects for Seattle, again, we hope you'll come. Right. We understand that if you decide you can't, we're continuing to consider what other options we might be able to undertake, and the logistics and the cost and the considerations. It's a hugely complex process. And one of the things that we know and that we've explained more fully on the website is, you know, we just can't offer any more of a hybrid option because of the technological and the logistical limitations that we have. Unfortunately, you know, maybe the task force that's going to look at conventions of the future, unfortunately right now, the technology in our convention sites hasn't caught up with what we would need to have to be able to deliver that kind of model. And so, our convention center and our Sheraton hotel where our sessions are holding, they just don't have the capacity to handle the kind of traffic. And we really, I think, carefully considered what a hybrid experience would mean for the people that were actually there in person and how to make all of that work. And so ultimately, right now, the decision is to go forward with the face-to-face convention. And, I personally am looking forward to that, even, is that we'll be gathered in mass and we might be social distance. And again, we're going to follow all of the guidelines that absolutely are in place to make it, the safest that we can and the best experience for folks. It's a difficult situation, and we recognize that, and we appreciate all of the support that we're hearing, as well as we hear all the concerns as well. So I think I'm going to stop there. I continue to look forward to seeing many of you there in person, to the great sessions. We've got 998 individual program slots this year. And I think some really fantastic things that have fully embraced the renewal and transformation ideas and the theme. And I think it's going to be an exciting convention. So I'll stop and we'll, I guess, open it for questions at this point. So.
Thanks, Roseanne. And just as someone who I think, just to reassure, I think those of you here and those of you who will be listening later, and to say that as someone who in my first year here working as an officer have been really heartened by the the rigorousness and the quality of the conversation around each of these. There's a very, we're taking folks' concerns as they come up very seriously. There's really rigorous debate. There's rigorous debate around these things, and ultimately, I think there's a general sense that we're trying to do our best given the context, the limitations, et cetera. So I just wanted to kind of reassure those of you, because I know I sometimes have questioned that myself, frankly, about NCA. So I wanted to just be open about that, at least in my experience with these conversations. So I really appreciate that. And so I also wanted to say, for those, some of you are sending me just direct messages. I wasn't clear how to send the message, but do send it to everyone. That way, there's transparency there, and it also keeps a record of who is asking in what order. So I'll start with Tiffany and actually Maureen, and they're kind of the same essential question. So Roseanne, could you speak about this idea of, what about folks who want to join in those live streamed? How do they go about it? What's the cost?
Unmute myself again. There we go. Yes, there is no registration for those. Those are going to be open to members. So as long as you are a member, you will have access to those. So there's not a convention registration for those 9 sessions. And so that's one of the things that we felt really strongly about, making sure that those were available to members who were not going to be able to travel, or who were choosing not to be able to travel, and also to your students who are members. So that is something that we're providing openly. So I hope that answers both of those questions. Right?
I just wanted to add something to that. I have a colleague who is planning to submit her video to someone on her panel and have it, which is one of the options for if people are not going in person. Will there be a cost incurred if somebody is scheduled to present, is not coming in person, but is having somebody else deliver their presentation and is planning to include it on a CV?
I don't think there's any way we would, if they're not registering for the convention. I guess that's an option we hadn't really talked about, but I don't think so. Linda, do you want to weigh in on that real quickly? I don't think there'll be any cost to that person.
No, I don't believe that there is, but I will confirm that and get that out along with the information about the recording.
Yeah. And one of the things just to note, if people do choose that option, again, one of the things we're highly, highly recommending is that it is not something that is streamed, but that the person who is going to be playing that presentation has downloaded it previously. Again, we're working on really large limits in terms of the bandwidth and the available, so that if things were being streamed across the 50 or 60 sessions at the same time, it's just not going to work, right? And which is a part of the challenge of any kind of a hybrid model like that. So, but yeah, we'll check and confirm that, but I don't believe so.
Thanks, Roseanne. So let's see, I want to make sure that okay, so to go in order, to be fair to one person just direct messaged me before I verbally reminded folks. So I will ask their question. Is there any talk about mandating vaccines for face-to-face participants based on yesterday's FDA full approval? And then we'll go to Ruth's questions after that. But I could speak to that, but I'll let Roseanne, since you're leading this, I'll let you take it.
Sure. Well, and we are currently talking about lots of things connected to other things that could be doing. And certainly the question of vaccinations is one that is a number on that list. And so, we're going to be having an executive committee conversation soon. And it's a complicated question. Events that are going to vaccinations, for example, like entertainment venues or a place, one of the complications, the folks let me try this, like a concert hall that is requiring a vaccination for a performance can control entry and exit. Right. People are only coming one time. And one of the complications of the convention for us to really think through is all of the logistics of being able to do that. Some people arrive on Thursday, some people arrive on Saturday. We're doing sessions in a hotel as well as in the convention center. There are multiple entrances. It's a really complex kind of thing to think about how this might work if we were to choose it. So please know that we're thinking about it. We're going to be talking about it. And I think that's all, honestly, we can say at this moment, is that it's under consideration.
I will add also that there's a list, there's an increasing amount of information around restaurants and bars in the area that are requiring vaccine passports. And so we'll be including all those things with that. But yes, to echo Roseanne's comment, that is absolutely in discussion and in discussion soon. We need to decide. We're past really almost the point of decision, but this is a really critical question that we'll be deciding very, very soon. Let's see, and then I saw that someone else asked the same question. The next two questions are, how many people are needed for the 2021 convention to be financially feasible? What happens if we as an organization don't make a break-even amount? Let's answer that, and then we'll go to the next one.
Well, I think that's one of the pieces of information, or at least some estimates, that's up on the page on the website. But essentially, if we were to cancel the contract completely with the hotels, like we did last year and went to a virtual option, I think the estimate is around $900,000 that we would owe the hotel and the convention center for canceling the contract. So most of these contracts are written with a step down. So there's a guarantee for food and beverage in the contracts, and there's also a guarantee for room blocks, particularly our contract with the Sheraton. So as we don't, so it's by percentages, is my understanding of this particular contract. So we basically, owe the convention sites a certain amount if we only meet certain percentages of occupancy. That might be the easiest way to say that. So it's not really, I don't really have a clear dollar figure, right? Or numbers of people. Our registrants, of course, for NCA is a different question. That's a different, idea of thinking. I mean, we will be a go with however many people come, right? But the convention is, is pretty much, we could lose some in terms of just what it costs to put it on versus the number of registrants that show up as well. But, we're prepared for that. The larger question is the convention hotel contracts and the convention center contracts. Last year, convention centers, the convention business was much more willing, right, to make accommodations because of the heightened emergency situation. So we were able to work with the Marriott Corporation, which was our contract. Our contract was with them last year, to not have any penalties with them. And then we negotiated going back to that same site. I think it's maybe 2027 that we will go to Indianapolis instead of 2020, right? So, but this year, the convention and bureau and the convention business, we just aren't seeing that kind of willingness to negotiate options. And unfortunately, this doesn't count in any way our current situation as a force majeure that often is written into those contracts. It's, so we would be liable for that. So I hope that answers the question, and happy to follow up on that if I need to.
And it might be, if the person who asked the question has an immediate follow-up, if you just raise your hand, your virtual hand, maybe we'll try to do that. To do that as well. Okay, so the follow-up question, the second question to that, and I'm going to link it with Bree's question. They're related but separate in some ways. The first question is, what happens if we register for the conference and then our institution disallows travel due to COVID-19? Would we be able to get registration fee refunded or reduced? I know that we've pushed back, just that is a comment, I know that we've pushed back the early registration fee, partly because of that, but and then Bree's question is not related to necessarily reduced registration, but during the submission period, there was language on the website about virtual options, but it seems like that will be limited to keynotes. Now that we have more information about the limited nature of virtual options, if we need to cancel a panel or presentation, what's the best way to go about doing so? So one is about, refunding registration fees or reduced registration fees if the registration gets disallowed. And the second is about if we need to cancel our, if we can't make it and we don't have someone else to present the recording for us, what do we do? Or if there's a whole panel that is unable to go, what happens?
Well, again, I think that with the question about the refund of the registration fees, I think maybe that's that's a really important question, particularly if an institution, if your institution disallows you from coming. But I have to be honest that I don't believe that we have talked about that as on the executive committee in terms of setting a policy for that. So I think that we'll add that to our agenda because I think that's an important question. And that may, the person that's asking that, that may not be the only, time that we hear that question in that scenario. The other one, I'm sorry, Waleed, I forgot the second piece of it.
Oops, sorry. And by the way, I just sort of add Roseanne too. So, it might make it so they're also looking to further even extending the reduced fee and then encourage folks that if they haven't yet registered to wait until they have more certainty on that. But again, we'll talk more about whether we can extend the reduced fee. And the Bree's question was if they need to cancel their panel, how would they go about doing that? Or if they needed to cancel one presentation, if they're a presenter and they needed to cancel, how would they go about doing that?
I saw that someone, I'm not sure if it was Linda, that put the link in earlier. If you look in the chat, there's an email for Kristen Yednock at the national office. It's KYEDNOCK @natcom.org. And Kristen is our wonderful, talented staff person who is our director of conventions. And so she is the one that would handle the cancellations, or it's too late to change the program, however, because that just went to press. We can change the online, but the program will appear in the print. But Kristen can handle whatever the logistics are of canceling the program from that point. So that would be unfortunate, but we understand.
Thanks, Roseanne. Elizabeth asks, and this is a good clarification because Roseanne, you were referencing the Seattle indoor mask mandate. And so the question is, and the reference will be following that mandate. And I think based on our previous conversations, we'll be following all mandates as they are present during the convention. But the question is, if by November the city no longer has the indoor mask mandate, will NCA have one for our indoor sessions? I ask because the current CDC recommendations of indoor masking for all, even if vaccinated.
I think that's a really good question, and that's part of what makes this. I mean, I think it's an indication of the difficulty of what, as the situation moves and changes, the difficulty of setting policies, the difficulty of making those kinds of decisions, the difficulty of sort of what, so what the best I think that we've been trying to say consistently is, of course, we're going to follow all of the health and safety guidelines in terms of the facility, the city, the local, the state, the national, the CDC guidelines. And so I think as the situation continues to be in flux, the masking decision would be one that the executive committee would need to make, as the situation changes. Okay. So at this point, we decided not to require them, to make them available because they weren't required in the locality or in the facility. But as things change, of course, we'll change with those. So I know that's a non-answer to the question, but I think that very honestly, that's the best that we can say at this point, because we don't know what November is going to look like. And we hope that, as we encourage them and as we, encourage people to take the precautions, that, we can make it as safe as we can. But I think that's another question for the executive committee to make, because that's not solely my decision. But as we think about how this convention is going to work for everyone, those are the kinds of questions that, as the situation changes, our decisions may need to change with that. So I wish I had a more specific answer, but I alone can't really speak to that. I think that's the kind of decision that the group will need to make when we meet.
And just to follow up on what Roseanne's saying, so I think we're in agreement that obviously we'll be following all local mandates. That's obvious. The question is, do we follow anything, any CDC mandates beyond those? And I think one of the, and that's the sort of the question you're asking, and I think it's a really good one. I think one of the things that we're in a position of sort of this kind of considering, and those, by the way, are going to be questions that we're discussing with the executive committee very shortly, as Roseanne is saying, the vaccination, the requirement potentially if you're not vaccinated of a negative COVID test, and other kinds of things like masking. Those are all on the table at our next EC meeting. Kent also reminded me that I referenced vaccine passports. There are apps that that a lot of conventions are using, organizations are using, et cetera, that you upload your evidence of vaccination and or negative COVID tests, and that is sort of what's considered the vaccine, quote unquote, vaccine passport. And lots of bars and restaurants in Seattle and various places and events and things like that are using those as sort of the mode of evidence. It comes with some complications because of the various ways in which like negative COVID tests work, for example. I mean, you could sometimes COVID doesn't show up for 3 or 4 days. And so there are logistical complications tied to that, but that's just in reference to what I was saying in terms of the passport and some of the ways that we're considering in the EC of what makes sense and is fair for everyone. I wanted to note, thank you, Linda, if you didn't see it, the answer about refunds for registration fees. Linda notes the NCA policy is that refunds will be issued for registration less than $25 processing fee if requested in writing. So the email convention@natcom.org by October 29th. So that's quite a ways out. So we'll want to remind folks of that on that COVID website and in other ways, just so that you're all familiar with that policy.
And, let me add one more thing there real quickly too, is the complication with the masking, and again, it's the nature of the kind of event that we have is, NCA could say, yes, we require masks at all of our sessions, but many of our sessions are in a hotel. And if the Sheraton doesn't require masks, we can do what we can, right? So I mean, there's all these layers, right, to that in terms of where we'll be and where our sessions are and who you're riding the elevator with. And I mean, we can try to control what we control, but that's part of the dilemma and part of the challenge, I think. So as we think through this, yeah.
I'd also say that if whatever we decide as an EC, so let's say we say, yes, we're going to require masks, people will make decisions based on that. And so if in 3 months the situation is very different and masks are not necessary, then we will still need to abide by that mask rule. So those are just some of the things that we're considering in terms of what can we delay and what do we need to make the decision for now. Some things like masks require a different level of enforcement than, let's say, if we were going to require uploading of things and app and all that. So some things really are time bound in terms of a decision that needs to happen very, very shortly. Other things we can delay on a little bit potentially. So just again, to reflect on some of the process. Okay, so for those that don't know, Sheraton Westin Hotels are now part of the Marriott Hotels group. Has there been any discussion around feasibility or availability of rapid COVID testing for convention attendees? Really good question. Again, that's going to be part of the EC meeting when we discuss these things, the idea of logistics. So let's say someone shows up not having read their requirement or having forgotten their app or not being comfortable. What are these? We need to think about through all the logistics. There needs to be a possibility for someone who shows up and can get a rapid test essentially right there and then if we do this thing. So these are all part of learning more about the logistics in the surrounding area of the convention, or whether there's a way even that, what are the various options for NCA at the convention? So that's a really good question that we're definitely going to be including in our discussions. So yes, Rich, Roseanne's challenge is predicting the unpredictable. Let's see, does NCA and or organizers have something in place regarding contact tracing just in case a mass infection is traced to the convention events?
Well, that would be, my head is spinning trying to think about how we might do that, given the nature of what our events at the convention typically are like. But I think it's an important question. I don't mean to disparage that at all, but I can't even fathom how that might work, because we mix and mingle and we're all going to different sessions and there's 60 things going on at the same time, and we don't have assigned seating. And so I think Joseph, you raise a really important question, but we can try to see if there's models that other associations are using at conventions, maybe that are happening earlier than ours. But that's a really, really, really difficult one. It's not like contact tracing your students in your classrooms that are going to sit in the same seat every day. And so I welcome ideas about what that might look like, but it's important, but I don't know. So we'll look for models, I guess, and see if we can come up with any kind of a plan for that. It's not something that we had talked about.
Yeah, there are geo apps. Maggie's mentioning that they're sort of geo-based, geolocation-based, and other kinds of like COVID Watch. One of the concerns is, enforcement, and what can we require of everyone and are they going to follow the requirements, and are they going to, so that one of the things that, ideal world, I think that might be one version of an ideal world, right, is that we have these apps that do in fact track exactly where you are and are able to, there's whether we decide to do that, and then even if we decide to do that, whether we can legislate it, I think are some of the concerns that some of the questions and concerns that are raised often in these discussions. So that's kind of to follow with what Roseanne is saying on that. I think I skipped a question, Allison's question. Sorry, Allison. Will there be a hybrid or virtual option for legislative assembly for divisions with a rep who cannot attend in person? Can we vote or appoint a replacement closer to the convention date per bylaws of each group? I know we normally like to name them far in advance. So the question is, let's say you're a rep on legislative assembly, you can't make it, or you choose not to make it. What happens, and what's the option for replacement?
Yeah, I'm going to kick that question to David, since he's in charge this year.
Yeah, the LA will be face-to-face rather than a hybrid, but if you're unable to attend for whatever reason, then a proxy could be established based on whatever bylaws a particular group has.
Thanks, David. Let's see here. Yes, thanks, Ruth. Contact person. When would NCA need to know if we are naming a proxy? David?
It wouldn't have to be anytime soon. It could be essentially at the last minute, and it would be fine. Yeah, sooner is always better, but if a proxy is established, then that's fine. Oh, bylaws prohibit proxies, I guess. So I guess I got that one wrong, according to the bylaws. But
okay, so this is a really good question for us to, I think, gather more information on, because we also have to figure out exactly how the person contacts, whether, what the division bylaws versus NCA's bylaws. And so these are really good questions. So thank you. And this is one of the functions of these listening sessions, is just to gather this information, gather questions, and get back to you. So, so we will do so. And, I don't know, how we will get back to you on some of these things is we haven't really, I think, formalized yet. Again, these are the early, we're learning a lot from these things. It's not just the second one. Depending, it could either be an NCA wide email, or certainly the COVID page, and the NCA, the convention page will include updates of these sorts that are relevant to folks who are unable to come to the convention or are concerned.
Well, and I'll add to that if there is that our website, and particularly that convention website, that page, that information page is designed to be fluid and to be sort of the central place where the information is logged. But certainly with any major changes with the convention, that would be on our website. But I think that we would certainly welcome probably think about a post to the comm notes as well, so to try to get the message out in as many ways as we can, or a member direct email. So we'll use all the tools that we can to try to continue to keep in touch with everyone about the really important questions that you're raising.
We're waiting on additional questions. I want to just add a little bit, I think, in part of our deliberations, which I think, again, were insightful being part of that process. So we did consider various options for hybridity. I think Roseanne already talked about that, and the report there is in terms of the various reasons why, some of the factors why we weren't able to go to more hybrid convention, because there's definitely folks at the table who wanted a more hybrid convention, partly logistics, partly cost. One of the things that struck me in those conversations was a reminder of some situations we've had in the past, rare but important, of folks coming in with nefarious purposes and recording individuals with real potential threat for their well-being. So there was cases where folks who were recorded, who were being critical of a government or a related entity, were being recorded, and then folks were distributed on social media in ways that really presented a very real risk and threat to them. Now, luckily, these are rare experiences, but in a system where we haven't asked folks if they're comfortable in their presentation being widely distributed for whoever wants, one version was, let's just open it and let folks live stream it as they wish. Presents some real risks to folks, oftentimes the folks most marginalized and most at risk. And so in thinking about future conventions, I could imagine a place where you ask folks, are you comfortable with your presentation being live streamed? And once we have those, we can put together panels that are don't involve that risk as much. But as it currently stands, given that people presented submitted things without any such notion that it would be live streamed, that's at least one of the things that struck me as an important consideration that I hadn't really considered adequately, and really pushing for thinking through the logistical realities. Ultimately, there are logistical realities that even if we wanted to, would really hinder the quality of what we can do. But there's also non-logistical concerns that need to be thought through. And again, in this convention task force, future convention task force, hopefully get addressed or resolved for the long term. Let's see. So I'm just seeing a direct message, and the person was not sure if it was the appropriate forum for the question, but it is. Let's see. Maggie Williams asks, is it possible to share about the results of proposals or new initiative that were approved at the latest EC meeting? David, I'm trying to think of what was approved as final in a final capacity that we could share. And I don't think there's a whole lot of that. There was a lot of discussion around things, but.
Yeah, a lot of discussion, but nothing officially approved at the previous meeting.
I can add to that a lot of the discussion circulated around the IDEA strategic plan that was talked about, and we talked about next steps. And so if there was, one decision made was to move forward with the process toward adopting that. And so right now the executive committee is reviewing it, submitting comments, then it will go to our IDEA council members for their review. And so we're moving forward with the process again for that very significant document to hopefully be approved by the end of the year is what we're hoping. So that's certainly one really significant piece.
There was also two caucus proposals that were submitted to EC. They were approved by EC, but they're going next to the Legislative Assembly for discussion. But yeah, a lot of discussion around the IDEA Strategic Planning Committee or Task Force, a lot of discussion around the convention, discussion around policies that we need to adjust at NCA, discussion around the executive director search. I mean, it was a very full, whatever number of hours, 8 hours or whatever it was, but primarily a discussion rather than any final sort of decisions.
And for the caucuses, and there was also one division, we just endorse or don't endorse, and then it goes to the LA, and the LA is the ultimate decision maker on any new caucus or any new division.
So these are really great questions. We do have about 15 minutes left if anyone has additional questions about the convention or things other than the convention. There's also any sort of ideas that you might have just generally about how we're doing as officers, how we're doing at NCA, about the executive committee, about the executive director search, about, and you just open it to any kind of feedback or about NCA, how we're doing, and thoughts that you might have. That's the space for it.
And
among
actually,
other spaces.
If there's one thing, what are some of your thoughts on mandating a vaccine in order to attend the conference? I know it's something that the EC will be discussing, but does anybody have any thoughts and ideas that you would share? That you would
I would just raise your hand or put in text. Either raise your hand or put in text just to control the. And just to be clear, raise your virtual hand because I can't, there's,
Oh, looks like
Patrice.
Yeah.
I thought I was just agreeing. I didn't think I was going to have to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Patrice,
Agreeing with.
So
I
would
think
you be part of it then?
It would be useful. I would say, you can't put it to a vote, I guess, but to gather some information about what people would say. Of course, I live in Florida. It doesn't really matter what we think here.
Maggie?
Hi, thank you for all your leadership and for engaging us in this discussion. I think that's a really tough question to ask because I have I think everybody should be vaccinated. That's me. I think mandating masks, regardless of what the hotel says, if that's something that we can strategically do and get that out there so that we're sort of guaranteed that. And I say that from a perspective of a person that has a young family that cannot be vaccinated. So when I think about whether or not I'll attend NCA this year, I think about my entire social network, and my attendance at this conference could impact, my family. And so although my children can't be vaccinated, I can be, and my colleagues and peers, many of them can be. And if you can be vaccinated, that's a great family forward, very strong recommendation. But as we think about families in our bigger network, and some of the activism that NCA, I think, is really pushing forward, that our public health is an important concern, not just for us, but also in Seattle and then all the traveling and the impacts that we have. So I hope that as you guys are making that decision, families in our close networks are also on your mind. And I know they are. Thank you.
What about some issues with mandating the vaccine? There's so many. It's, as Roseanne mentioned, it's multi-layered in terms of some of these decisions and their enforcement and how we logistically manage it. Does anybody have any issues with the mandate?
I don't have any issues. I just think that it'd be very hard to enforce it. Whereas, as Maggie, I guess it was, just said about doing the masks is easier to mandate than, you know, when you get into the have you been vaccinated, and you get into the privacy issues. So I can't imagine, you know, what I do for example, in the job fair and the grad school open house. How would you, you know, mandate that? And people can say it's my right to privacy, HIPAA laws. You know, I don't have to tell you my medical issues. So anyway, I just think it'd be real hard for you all to do that. Masks would be easier to mandate. So
it's definitely complicated, that's for sure. Anyone else? I didn't want to take over the forum.
I would just say in terms of other organizations, Nina, Joe, and your point is taken about privacy for sure. In terms of logistically, some folks, just to give you a sense for some things. So we looked into organizations that could actually run the whole thing in terms of, you know, the checking the, you know, the vaccination status, et cetera. And those are already booked for a convention our size. It would be the only option would be an app, and then the app could be used upon either registration, and so it would be linked to your to people's you know, tag, and we'd have to be really good about making sure people wear those, you know, all over, which there's inconsistency there, but there would have to be, you know, clear guidelines there, or check that the you know, at the entrance of each door to you know, events, which does then dramatically increase the labor. One of the questions is, who, you know, do we want to put this enforcement on staff? You know, things like that. So we're looking into all these things, but just to give you a sense for how some organizations are managing this. And ultimately, I don't think there's going to be any decision that everyone's going to be happy with. So we are looking at the sort of what's best logistically and in the best interest of our members and the convention. I'm trying to think. Let's see here.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I just want to add that I appreciated Waleed letting people know that we've been seriously considering this issue among many others. And there have been rigorous debates and lots of information and research and background information. We've been looking at other professional organizations and what they're doing, how things are working out for them, the kind of size of the organization, the number of members, whether they have a single space, convention, or conference, how their members are responding, and so forth. And we're certainly mostly concerned about members' health and well-being. And so I just want you to know that no matter what decisions we end up making, that is foremost on our minds. You know, going to a convention is important. It's important to people's careers, but health is actually more important than that. And so we keep that front and center in our discussions, and we think very specifically and in a focused way about health of members foremost as we're making these decisions. That said, I appreciated Nina Joe's comment because these are quite complex. So I'll just give you one element of the complexity. If we were to mandate, and you know, I'm a rhetorician, so the word mandate has a meaning to me. I'm not sure if it's the meaning in all cases. So if we were to mandate of vaccines, enforcement becomes the immediate thing that people think of as a way to guarantee the mandate. And so even, let's say with, so let me finish that thought and let me say one more. It's difficult to enforce. It's difficult to enforce with an app. It's difficult to enforce with a company. If we were, I think, I'm just guessing, if we were to mandate vaccinations, we would probably also have to say we can't guarantee that someone won't show up unvaccinated, even if we've done everything we can to try to enforce it. And so I don't know how that would change people's perception of whether, and their own vulnerability, health vulnerability, were they to come to a convention in which the convention is saying they're mandating it, but whether or not they actually can guarantee enforcement, that's a secondary issue. Similar to masks, with thousands of people at a convention, if someone sees someone not wearing a mask properly, like under their nose, or not wearing a mask at all, what is the process by which we report, right? Do we rely on members to do that? Do we institute that as policy? Or do we hire 1,000 people, which would contribute, I think, to the health consequence if we hired 1,000 people, which it would also obviously be not economically feasible, to go around and look for people who are not masked and then report them. So I think that we want the absolute best situation for people's health, and we want people to think carefully about their decision about whether or not to come to the convention, especially if they're unvaccinated. I would encourage people not to come to the convention if they are unvaccinated. But I think that whatever decision we make, it will be very carefully and thoughtfully delivered, and there will have been lots of discussions and debate around that among people who have your interests in mind.
And something else I would add, Michelle and Maggie both put posts in the chat that these are things that we're considering. I would hate to have a graduate student on the front lines mandating mask wearing for their physical well-being and professional well-being. And also there's a need to consider those, as Michelle mentioned, who aren't available for vaccines or have medical conditions precluding masks. As I think many of you are realizing, it's the same things that have been driving a lot of our conversations. Every time we have an idea that seems feasible, it's something that is multi-layered, as I've mentioned before, and something is always saying, well, yes, but. And that could be a good thing, but whenever you're trying to plan a convention and having nearly 1,000 sessions and thousands of attendees, it becomes very, very difficult. Yeah, I'm glad it's you and not me this year, Roseanne. Although it wasn't easy for me last year.
But I just want to echo what Kent said, and David as well. Is that, I think if you've been watching the chat as well, there's just so many layers of complexity around the issue. And as soon as we say we're protecting one group, we're disenfranchising another potentially. There's nothing, the question of enforcement and who will do it and how will that be done. The volunteer labor at our conventions usually does fall to the graduate students, right? Or I think that if we're hiring people, I think that Seattle Convention Center is a union site, so we would be constrained by how would we do that and who would we hire and what would be available. Not that that means that we couldn't all work that out, but I think there's so many layers as we've been thinking through this issue and as we continue to think through this issue. And so, we ask for your patience, we ask for your understanding, as Kent said, that we have at the utmost concerns for everyone's well-being, to do the best that we can do. And, in the circumstances, but the circumstances are really, really difficult. And so we'll make the best decision that we can and hope that, we can all come and we can all enjoy whoever will be with us and streaming with us and still have a terrific convention. Despite the challenges, because it is important to us and to our community and who we are as scholars and teachers and professionals, and we know that. So thanks. That's my message. Is thanks for your patience and for your understanding.
And so we are about 3 minutes from time. I just wanted to add, first of all, I really appreciate, and we all do really appreciate the vigorousness of the feedback. Actually, Shelley, your comment about the sticker does remind me that we are, in fact, the NCA office had this great idea of instituting a sticker policy that indicates not so much what you're saying necessarily, although we'll think about that as well, but stickers for preferences, for how close to stand to someone, or how to, so there's going to be you'll be hearing more about this, but in terms of how comfortable everyone is for proximity, essentially, and or that's, I think, the primary thing of a sticker. Linda, did I get that right? You want to clarify? You would do this much better than I did.
Sure. So we're looking at almost using the stoplight model in relation to how comfortable people are with their personal space. So green may be something like, I have no personal bubble, come talk to me. And red could be, great to see you, I'm staying 6 feet. So it would be a ribbon or something attached to the badge that would show people in an easy way how others are comfortable during the convention in terms of proximity.
Thanks, Linda. That's perfect. Yeah, I was like stumbling to try to explain that. So I just wanted to say, so please do continue to send us your feedback. This is really helpful for all of us. The feedback that you have, the concerns that you have, the suggestions that you have. Feel free to email any of us. Our emails are readily available on the NatCom website, or Linda, and we do address them all in terms of we discuss them, and they're very useful for us. So as you can see, we're engaging this rigorously, and there's not going to be a perfect solution, but the more feedback that we get, I think the more rich the democratic deliberation is. And that's what we hope to have. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you around, I guess. So thank you for attending.